This is Fulvi, genuine Fulvi Pec Romano. Without this cheese, well, my partner always jokes he'd probably be on the beach today. Oh, actually, he is on the beach as we talk about it. I don't know where I'd be, but this is one of the last remaining Pec Romano cheeses produced in the countryside of Rome. And I say one of the last because as soon as you say it's the last, there's going to be somebody who's making 2 wheels a day, and no matter what, they're making it, so then that will make me a liar, and I don't want to be a liar. But Pec Romano was born in Rome, was born in the countryside of Rome. Technically, you could have made the cheese in the provinces of Rome, Latina, Rieti, and Viterbo, where we are. The cheese for many years was made just there. The sheep are the same sheep we just saw in the Caccia di Roma. This is Nepi again, so we have the same sheep that make the cheese. The cheese has to be at least 50-pound wheels, but if you look here, our wheels are like 65, 70 pounds. They have to have the seal of the sheep. It's like a triangular sheep with dots. It has to say Pec Romano. This black rind that you saw on the front wheel used to be mud. Something about mud, I think that the US government would like for cheese to come in that way, but it was like the typical way to preserve the cheese years ago. Roman Pec Romano has a sheep that produced milk that is richer in fat and protein. And on top of it, the Fulvi family, who the Sini family bought the cheese from, aged their cheese longer than what the DOP said it had to be. The DOP, when I started in 93, this cheese by law had to be aged minimum 8 months, then 6 months, and now only 5 months. Because in the end, the greatest majority of the production isn't in Rome anymore. It's in Sardinia. Sardinia has cooperatives where a lot of people take their milk, go to a cheese plant, make the cheese, and it keeps the cost down. The sheep there don't produce a milk as high in fat, and they produce more milk. So the ability to make the cheese brings the cost down again. So in the world, it costs less money. And since the majority of the volume for making this cheese is an industrial cheese used in sauces and in potato chips and in everything else, people were more interested in price than anything else. This price imbalance eventually forced out most of the Roman producers, so that when I started, there were 3 of us. And today, of those other producers, they've all gone out of business. I have chills again. It's really sad. They were my competitors, but they were our brethren. They were the people that we were like the Roman producers holding up the tradition of a cheese called Pec Romano. I got mad with the president of Slow Food, and I had exchanged some words years ago. And he was trying to tell me Pec Romano was born in Sardinia. And I'm like, that is absolutely ridiculous. There is like sightings back to the days of Caesar for Pec Romano. This is Pepe wearing one of our hats. He is such a funny joker. He has a specific Napoleon hat that he saves for me when I go there. And then he puts gladiator hats on people. Pierluigi's father, when he died, this was Pierluigi's father's partner, who takes over and runs this plant along with Pierluigi's brother and cousins and different things. So they maintain the tradition of this amazing sheep's milk cheese, which today is still between 10 months and 1 year of age as opposed to 5 months. And we don't skim the milk. Most of the people in Sardinia skim the milk. So when you look at the cheese, it's very yellow. Most Pec Romanos, if you have it in your mind, are very, very white. As you taste the cheese, play with it, please. Play with your food. So break it off, mash it in your fingers, feel that it's not as hard as it seems, and that there's still a lot of moisture in the cheese. For this cheese to be as special as it is, it needs to be aged in salt. A lot of people brine their cheese. This goes hand salted. I think we have a nice picture. It goes hand salted wheel by wheel by wheel. Every week, then every 2 weeks, then every 3 weeks, so that the salt gradually seeps in to the center of the cheese. Can we see if we have some, we might have a salting picture here. I can't remember.
Salty picture.
No salting picture? Okay. Anyway, the salt has to go in gradually because if you block the salt on the rind, then the center of the cheese will be bland. If you add too much salt on the rind, it creates rind so that you as a consumer buying the cheese have something more that you have to grate, so you have less of a value. If you do it slowly, you have less of a rind and you can eat more of it. Sometimes it's hard to discern salty from sharp. This cheese is both. It's been aged for 3 months in salt, but it's sharp because it's aged so long, and it's sheep, so it's sharp sheep. And a lot of people just think salty right away, but if you pay attention as you're tasting it, you'll get the sharpness and the sheep, and then the saltiness, for me, is not overpowering. This is something I eat by the chunk. There's a festival called Pecorino con le fave in May. They take fresh fava beans and they just peel them and they just eat them with chunks of pecorino and drink lots of wine. And I have to say there was a lot of white wine there, even though red sometimes can overpower the bouquet of this cheese, but very often this cheese will overpower the bouquet of most wines. It is a big, bold cheese. This cheese, as opposed to Parmigiano Reggiano, where we grow up, where our terroir is, there's the cooking and the cuisine changes. So center and south of Italy are hearty cuisines. So you need a cheese that's going to stand up to the cuisine. So there you'd use Pecorino Romano. If you use a cheese like Parmigiano, you're throwing your money away because you need to use too much cheese. It's a better value to just use a little bit of this. Red sauce, spicy, capers, flavorful things need a flavorful cheese, and you use less cheese. Caesar salad, I vote for Pecorino Romano because you have anchovy and mustard and all of those ingredients. And if you use a grana or a cow's milk cheese, you need way more texture and flavor than if you use a little bit of just punch of a cheese. At the same time, if you add Pecorino Romano to a risotto with the cream and the cheese, it's too much. You need a lighter cheese, so there you use Parmigiano. So depending if you're making a light dish, you use the cow's milk cheese or a cheese that is a sweeter flavor. And if you have a hearty dish, you want something that like this cheese here. A cool fact, every wheel of cheese has an address on it. It tells you the month of production, the year of production. It tells you the name of the producer. This was important to us because when we first started, I didn't say this cheese costs more. I sort of said that we got pushed out of business, most of the producers, because it costs less in Sardinia to make it. But sometimes that difference in price could be $4 a pound or more. And when there were articles written over the years, they never explained the difference in the labor and the handliness, or that it's a single producer versus a co-op, and the sheep having less milk. So nobody ever talked about that. But there's a very big difference in cost. So some furbi, and that's the word for like foxy smart Italians, would dress up their Pecorino Romano wheels from Sardinia with the black wax, make them a little bigger, and sell them to Italians in the US and say, oh, they'll never know the difference, but they'd charge them more money because they'd make them think it was from Rome. So that wasn't on the up and up. So it was important for us to have a way of showing people that our cheese really did come from where we said it. And every wheel of cheese showed it. And often our competitors would just be like, oh, they don't make their cheese there. They're lying. And this was just like, I'd lose a sale for 1 penny a pound, and I'd lose a sale of cheese. This is the Pecorino Romano market, not this cool specialty cheese market. So it was a whole other world, which I'm so happy that we're in the specialty cheese world, although I have to say that right now, still, sales are super weird. People have kind of forgotten about a lot of the specialty cheese. But through it all in all, if it weren't for this cheese, I wouldn't have fig cakes or mostarda or Portuguese almonds or torta da casar or tarali. I wouldn't have most of what we do because we had to be successful putting this cheese where people wanted to sell it. And we still have a long way to go. We don't sell enough of it. It's in some of the best shops and restaurants across the country, but it's still Pecorino Romano, which suffers from an image problem because the producers between the two areas, oh, I didn't tell you the story. In the 1950s, the president of Italy was from Sardinia, and he changed the law. He said, I come from Sardinia. We have economic hardship. We have all these sheep. We need help. I'm going to make the law that now Pecorino Romano can be made in the countryside of Rome or in Sardinia. And that's where everything started to change. And it just really, so most of the Romans are out of business. We are the representative of Pecorino from Lazio, besides like one other guy. And it takes a lot to explain why this is so different, why somebody should pay more money for it. And we don't have the luxury of having like a united front, like the Parmigiano, all the producers have a consortio, and they kind of all are on the same page when they go to sell something. But over the years, the Sardinians and the Romans have never like joined much together to sell their product. And it shows. It's harder. But anyway, we have to always have things to strive for, and that won't stop us. We'll keep going. But yeah, it's a lot of history for this cheese. I'm very proud to represent it, and every single one here. And I can't thank you enough for spending time with us today, for eating and teaching and learning. I hope you find that the Fulvi and the Crab Apple Mostarda really balance out really well together, and that you found a lot of new fun things to enjoy with your time. Thank you.
We do have a last question.
Awesome.
And so it is, since mold doesn't mean it's bad, how do you know if cheese is bad?
If you taste it and it burns like hell in your mouth that you want to spit it out, it's probably bad. Sometimes you talk about ammoniated, so it can be in the smell, but I find that that's, if you don't work with cheese all the time and you just smell a cheese, you can't always tell, because if a cheese is in your refrigerator has a lot of smells, and it might commingle with all other smells from what's in there, and it might be difficult to discern. So I would take it out, you let it breathe, and you taste it. And if it doesn't taste like the way it did when you first started and you don't like it, then you don't eat it anymore. It's not like the mold makes it be poisonous. It doesn't. It's just really not always as attractive to look at. And then the way a cheese goes bad, it just really depends on the type of cheese to know. But they change. Some get too hard and they crack. Some get too soft and get super stinky so that you just don't even want to put it in your mouth. Some things get, we saw today here, cheese mites. So it looks like the rind is just breaking down, and it's just tiny little like bugs, these mites that jump around and like form like like dirt, and they just grow more on hard cheeses. So there's 1,000 different ways that something can be bad, but a lot of times it's just using your olfactory smell and then your taste buds to taste a little bit. And the reality is you want to try and you don't leave your cheese forever in there. I'm very guilty because I'm traveling a lot, although, and so sometimes cheeses just get hard and dry out. And when you find some cheese that's starting to dry out, before you throw it away, try taking olive oil and rubbing it on the rind and letting it sit a little bit to see if it'll perk up again by having that olive oil, not on the rind, but in the face of the cheese. And otherwise you just, have to like kind of look at it and see it. Even sometimes the top layer of it looks like it might have gotten browner or drier, but if you cut into it, it might be fine again. So you just have to try and see.
It is different. It's creamier than typically you find the Sardinia style of being drier and a lot more salty. This has got more buttery flavor and sweetness to it, along with that little bit of salt, which works out.
Because we're not skimming the milk, in addition to the richness of the.
Yeah, so you're really getting that cream flavor out of it, which is really nice. And the fig jam, perfect. Just wonderful with that. So really
and the
nice.
Crab Apple Mostarda?
Yep, it worked too. Yeah, I'm now this is now going to be one of my favorite accompaniments. I love the tanginess. I love the mustard in this. That interesting flavor that comes across is just because you get the sweetness, but then all of a sudden you get that, you know, that tang, that sharpness that's in there, and that's magnificent.
I wonder,
Really.
actually, I'm going to try it on an ice cream.
Yeah, I could see that. You know, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't work. You know.